We've got some very exciting travel coming up, and I've been doing a ton of planning, and it's just got me thinking about all of my favorite places that we've traveled to in the past. So this week I wanted to share with you guys my top 5 van life destinations. Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tori if you guys are new here, and my husband and I have spent the last 4 years living and traveling in vans, which is so crazy, but we actually have some pretty major changes and travel coming up. So I've just been thinking a lot this week about all of the beautiful places that we've been so fortunate to explore over the past couple of years. So I decided it would be fun this week to share with you guys my top 5 favorite van life destinations. All of these areas are absolutely amazing travel destinations, but these ones in specific are really great for van life in my opinion. And that really does make a difference on the overall experience that I have when I travel. The more welcoming a community is to this lifestyle. All of the destinations that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today are out west, and that is just another personal preference of mine. I prefer van life out west. I have a little bit more access to free and dispersed camping, and there's just less people a little bit overall. But at the end of this video, I am going to be throwing in a couple of bonus East Coast van life destinations if you guys are interested, so stick around for that. My first and one of my favorite van life destinations in the US is Glacier National Park. This was actually my first national park ever and my first time seeing the Rocky Mountains, so I feel like that definitely just played a lot into how much of an effect this area had on me and how much I cherish and remember our time there. I just have never felt so free in my life. The views were absolutely breathtaking. The camping near the national park was plentiful, and the weather was absolutely perfect for van life in the summer. Josh and I don't have any kind of air conditioning in here. We do have fans, but we do try and travel a little further north or to cooler climates if we're able to in the summer, and this is definitely one of those places. It was so cozy, even though it was like July when we were there. We had the pleasure of exploring both Big Fork and Columbia Falls as well as Glacier National Park, so I feel like I really got to live like a local for a little bit and really explore different parts of the area, which I really love doing. We also got the opportunity to do some national forest hiking and some national park hiking, which I also really recommend, especially if you're traveling with pets. The scenery and the views don't end at the national park border, and Josh and I have had some of our favorite adventures hiking with Haley in national forests. So I definitely recommend checking out some trails in the national forest near Big Fork, and also the Big Fork in downtown Big Fork is hilarious. Venturing a little bit closer to Glacier National Park itself, you'll come to the town of Columbia Falls. Very small town, very quaint. I loved the small town feel. I've always lived in pretty urban areas, so this was like my first experience with a smaller town vibe for an extended period of time. And I did find a local coffee shop. If you guys know me, you'll know that's like one of my favorite things to explore when we're in a new place that I wanted to recommend to you guys today. It's called Montana Coffee Traders. It's very, very close to the edge of Columbia Falls on your way into the park. Super, super cute little cafe. I highly recommend trying the Huckleberry Latte. But if you're just in the area in general, just try anything huckleberry. I don't know that I really knew that huckleberries were a thing until this trip, and I very quickly became obsessed, and it's now one of my all-time favorite foods. The second area that I want to recommend to you guys today is the Bryce Canyon and Zion National Park area. I have lumped these two together because they aren't really that far from each other. I think it's only about an hour and a half drive between the two. So there is a ton of adventure to be had in one little area, which I think is always a great way to get the most out of your trips, especially if you travel like Josh and I do in shorter spurts. We're able to get a lot of adventure in without driving so many miles, which is always a plus in my book. I really wish I would have been able to spend a little bit more time in these areas because they are absolutely amazing. I did a ton of hiking while I was there. I think I actually ended up almost hiking like 32 miles that week, which is a personal record for me. I will say the towns surrounding Bryce Canyon and Zion are much smaller than some of the other towns that I've stayed in or near. So instead of having like a Walmart and a grocery store, things like that, Bryce Canyon had a post office and a small convenience store slash gift shop kind of thing. And Zion was kind of a similar situation. They have like some touristy attractions, but they don't have as much like big infrastructure in place. So try to plan ahead of time if you're headed to that area, especially if you're like picky choosy about your groceries like me. The access to nature and camping and adventure was one of the reasons that I fell in love with this area in particular. Not only is the camping very, very close to the entrance of the national park, free camping I might add, which is incredible. Oftentimes in other areas that we've stayed in, we found ourselves having to drive pretty far early in the morning to get to the trailhead, so this was just so convenient to be able to camp so close by. And I also really enjoyed the vast amount of different landscapes in this area that you can see in such a small radius. The national park itself, Bryce Canyon, once you're in the park, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. I felt like I was on an entirely different planet, and just like a short 10-minute drive to my campsite, I was in a very cozy forest, and it felt like two completely different worlds. So for my recommendations for this area, I'm going to recommend a couple of different hikes. Like I said, I didn't really do much exploring in town to have any cafes or anything like that to recommend to you guys. But as far as Bryce Canyon goes, I highly recommend hiking the Navajo Trail Loop. This is a very beginner-friendly hike. I will say there is a decent amount of elevation, so be prepared for that. But it is a shorter trail, so I think it's a little bit more manageable than some of the other hikes that I have set out on some of my adventures. And the views are absolutely worth it. I think this may be one of my favorite hikes that I have ever done. I have just never seen anything like the landscapes at Bryce Canyon, the hoodoos, the scale of everything, being able to hike down into the canyon and really experience how big and vast the landscape really is was just so incredible. It made me feel so small, and every corner that I turned, it just seemed to get better and better. As far as hiking goes at Zion National Park, I took on two different hikes. I hiked Angel's Landing, which is probably one of the more popular hikes at Zion. It is a very intense hike featuring very steep cliffs. There is a crossing that if you're afraid of heights, this hike may not be the hike for you. But if you're looking for that same kind of awe-striking view of the Zion Canyon, I highly recommend the Canyon Overlook Trail. This hike was a little bit longer than Angel's Landing. Angel's Landing is about 2.5 miles. This hike is about 7, but the incline change is very mild and the hike is very doable for almost anyone, and the views at the end are worth every step. This is probably one of the most incredible sunsets that I've ever had the opportunity to watch, and I just cannot recommend this hike enough to you guys. I really loved how you could get that same view as Angel's Landing without taking as much of a risk or giving yourself an anxiety attack if you're not into heights. With the Canyon Overlook Trail hike though, I do want to add that the parking situation at that trailhead is a little dicey. The road in is very washed out and a little bit rough, and the parking is very limited. I actually went to both of these parks in the off season. I personally really like to do that a lot to avoid crowds, so the temperatures were quite cold. It is freaking freezing this morning. I definitely should have worn some more layers. It's been like 63 during the day, but about 18 at night. So I just wasn't using my brain, but we still have all of our fingers, but we have a very pink nose. So if you're looking to avoid the crowd some, going in the later part of the year, early winter months is a great way to avoid some of the crowds. Otherwise, I recommend getting to this trailhead quite early to snag yourself a parking spot. The next area I want to recommend to you guys is the Flagstaff and Sedona area. A lot of these that I'm going to share with you guys today are kind of two destinations in one. I really do enjoy areas where I can kind of stay close by and get a lot of adventure in without putting so many miles on the van and doing so much driving. So this particular area honestly just blew me away with the versatility in environments. In Sedona, you're experiencing all of the beautiful red rocks, the cliffs, hiking to caves, and then a quick 20-30 minute drive, your elevation change goes up quite drastically and it almost feels like you've driven into Colorado. That was one of my favorite things about exploring Arizona, is how much variation in the landscape that there is within a short distance. And I loved the ability to explore the desert during the day and kind of escape to a more cozy, comfy environment for me for the evenings. I typically feel a little bit safer camping in wooded areas. I like the privacy that trees provide. So I found myself doing more of my camping up in Flagstaff and more of my hiking down in Sedona. So as far as recommendations go for this area, I could honestly talk for hours. I did so much hiking in Sedona and I was blown away by the sheer number of trails in that area. So the two that I'd like to recommend to you guys today are the Hangover Trail that was recommended to me by my friend Cody. This hike is a little bit longer. It's also a mountain biking trail if any of you guys are interested in that kind of thing. It is a little bit technical, about 10-mile hike, but the views are absolutely amazing, and it's one of the less popular hikes in Sedona, or less well known. So I just enjoyed having a little bit more peace and quiet on the trail than some of the other hikes that I did in the area. By far my favorite hike in Sedona is Cathedral Rock. It is a very short and sweet hike, straight up and straight down, but the views of Sedona itself at the top are unreal, but this is a very heavily trafficked hike, so I do recommend getting to the trailhead as early as possible. There were often lines of cars, of people waiting for spots. Since I did spend so much time exploring Flagstaff and Sedona, I have a couple of more recommendations for you guys in the food and beverage department. Flagstaff was one of the towns that just instantly stole my heart. It felt like home as soon as I arrived. I was actually traveling with my friends at this time, and this was the first time in my van life journey that I could just really see myself living somewhere. Like, I could imagine what it would be like to have an apartment in Flagstaff, and that's just a really interesting feeling for me in general, because I don't feel that sense of home in too many places that we travel to. The town itself is a very quaint, kind of small mountain town vibe, and it's also a college town, so there is lots of nightlife, coffee shops, all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to recommend to you guys Dark Sky Brewing Company. Not only is this one of the cutest breweries that I've been to on the road, they have the best pizza ever. After a long day of hiking and exploring, a pizza is always my go-to, so I ended up hitting up Dark Sky Brewing Company I think at least 3 times during my time in the area. And I also found a local meadery in Flagstaff that was really cool. It's a Viking themed meadery. I ended up trying one of their flights so I could try a lot more of their different flavors. The amount of options they had was really cool, and I just really loved the dedication to the Viking theme. They really hit it home. The next area I wanted to share with you guys is not one that I was actually expecting to spend too much time in. I had actually heard from a lot of other people that the area wasn't super van friendly and just wasn't a van life hotspot, so I was kind of just planning on passing through, but my plans changed as soon as I got there. Northern Utah is really incredible, and I want to go back and spend some more time exploring Salt Lake City, but the area I stayed in is a little bit south. I stayed near a town called Provo, and I was just blown away with how much I liked this area. Not only is it a little bit more urban than some areas like Bryce Canyon and Zion, you have a little bit more access to amenities if you need them, Walmart, coffee shops, easier to find internet, those kind of things, and that always just makes van life a little bit more seamless in an area, especially if you're going to be spending a little bit more time there. So that was actually one of the things that made me love this area so much, was just the convenience of it. Not only did I find one of the most beautiful campsites I've ever stayed at, and ended up staying a solid 2 weeks, which is as long as you're allowed to stay, I might add. But I also loved the ease of access to town. It was just a really quick drive to the local Walmart, so I could go and grab groceries and come back to my campsite. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. You get access to like city living and all of the amenities that come with that, but I also got to enjoy the comforts of having a secluded campsite, which I really loved. One of the particular reasons that I love this area so much is the abundance of hot springs nearby. As an East Coaster, this is just something that is still really new and fantastical to me, so I loved the ability to try out so many different hot springs all kind of in one area. If you just go on Google, type in Provo hot springs, you get access to a ton of different options. Some of them are a little bit easier to get to, some of them are paid, some of them are quite remote and involve some hiking, so there's something for everyone, and I highly recommend checking out at least one of the local hot springs if you're ever in the area. The last destination that I wanted to recommend to you guys today, but certainly not least, is the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone National Park area. Again, lumped together because you can get so much exploring done in one area, and I really love about this that you can drive through Yellowstone National Park and it almost kind of spits you out at the Grand Tetons, which is really convenient, and it's an exceptionally beautiful drive. Yellowstone National Park is the world's first national park, and it is almost 2.2 million acres of exploring for you to do. And this particular area, out of all of the places that I've traveled, is where we encountered the most wildlife. It was almost like being in a Nat Geo documentary, the amount of wildlife we were seeing. We saw bears, a moose, we saw a herd of bison, I even saw an antelope, which I didn't even know that we had stateside, which was so cool. And the Grand Tetons themselves really are that. They are so grand. It is the most rugged and raw mountain landscape that I've ever laid my eyes on, and I'm so grateful to have gotten to do so much hiking there. Josh and I actually set out on a hike that we were expecting to be 12 miles that day, which turned into a 21-mile hike. But for my recommendations for this area, I'm going to give you some national park recommendations this time, because that's most of the exploring that we did in this area. At Yellowstone National Park, Old Faithful is a must-see, and I highly recommend Grand Prismatic Springs. I would hit Grand Prismatic Springs first. It's much easier to get a good view when it's less busy, so again, morning's going to be your best bet to avoid the crowds. And there's 2 viewpoints for this particular spring. You can view the springs from eye level down near the spring, and if you really want the full effect of the vibrancy of the colors of this, I highly recommend hiking up to the overlook. That's when you can really see the effect of the temperature changes and the bacteria coloration, and it's just such a beautiful sight. If you can, try and avoid overcast days. On a really sunny days when you'll get those really vibrant colors. And when you make your way over to the Grand Tetons, I highly recommend stopping by Jenny Lake. This is one of the bigger attractions at Grand Teton National Park, and there are a lot of different hiking trails that kind of start from this parking area, so there's a lot of exploring. The hike that I want to recommend to you guys starting from Jenny Lake is the Cascade Canyon Trail. This trail is known for wildlife sightings, which is why I wanted to recommend it to you guys, and that's why we hiked it in the first place. Not only is it an absolutely stunning trail featuring a couple of different overlooks and waterfalls, waterfalls, but this is just the most wildlife I've ever really encountered on a trail. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we went in the morning. Wildlife does tend to be more active at dawn and dusk. So we did get up quite early for this hike, and I recommend that you do so as well, because encountering some of these animals in the wild is just unlike anything I've ever experienced. And you know me, being a foodie, there has to be a cafe recommendation in Jackson. Jackson is such a cute town, so when you wrap up your exploring at the Tetons for the day, head into town and grab yourself a drink and a pastry at Persephone Cafe. One of the things that Josh and I really loved about Persephone is that not only is it a coffee shop, they also serve beer, so it's kind of the best of both worlds for us. Josh really likes to explore breweries, and I'm more of a coffee shop person myself, so it was really cool to have like a one-stop shop for both. And you know, your girl is a huckleberry fanatic, so I tried the huckleberry croissant at Persephone, and it may be the best thing I've eaten in my entire life, and I still think about it regularly. So if you are ever in Jackson, make sure that you stop in at Persephone, even if you're just passing through. This cafe is an absolute must. And that brings me to the end of my list, and those are my top 5 favorite van life destinations in the US. But like I mentioned earlier, I am an East Coast girl born and raised, so I did want to share a couple of our favorite areas to explore when we're out east. So I'm going to give you one at the tippy top of the East Coast and one at the bottom. So we've spent a lot of time exploring both Michigan and Florida, and honestly those are my 2 favorite areas to explore on the East Coast. So in Florida, I highly recommend checking out St. Pete if you're in the area. It was a very van-friendly and accommodating town, and it was just such a cute vibe. And if you're ever in the area, make sure you grab a pistachio rose bar from Valhalla Bakery. And up in Michigan, if you're trying to escape the summer heat instead of the winter cold, we absolutely fell in love with Upper Peninsula Michigan, specifically the Paradise area. If you ever get the chance to hike up there, there is an amazing waterfall, Tequamanon Falls, that I highly recommend. And I grew up as a lake baby up in Michigan, so this place will just always hold a special place in my heart. That is all I have for you guys today, but I do have some very exciting announcements for you guys next week. So if you haven't yet, consider hitting that subscribe button, because things are going to get really exciting around here very quickly. And on that note, I'll see you guys next Tuesday.